Well, welcome today to our cooking demonstration. We're going to do 2 recipes for you today. The first recipe is salmon en papillote with a citrus gremolata, and our second recipe is a farro salad with roasted vegetables. And when I was putting the recipes together, I was thinking about my plate and how they tell you to have half of your volume of your food at meals coming from vegetables and or fruits. So both of these recipes incorporate a lot of vegetables, and I think it's a great way to add veggies to your diet if you add them to your entree. The farro salad you can use as an entree salad. You can add some protein to it, or you could add some chicken to it to make it a complete entree. Today we're using it as a side dish. And of course the salmon en papillote is the entree that we're preparing for you today. So I'm going to start out making the salmon recipe. And en papillote simply means that we're going to be cooking in a parchment pouch or in a paper pouch. This is a full sheet of parchment paper. You can find parchment paper in your supermarket. And the first thing I'm going to do is fold the parchment paper in half. I think this is a perfect recipe for a heart healthy demo, because the next thing I'm going to do is cut our parchment paper into a heart. So I'm going to make a half a heart. So I'm going to cut along the seam. And have to go back to your preschool days. And the parchment paper is going to be the package that we're going to use to cook our salmon and our veggies. Oh, did I introduce myself? My name's Lynda, and this is Jessica. And Jessica volunteered to help me today, and thank you very much. So once we cut our parchment into the half heart, we open it up and we have a complete heart. So I'm going to put this aside, and I'm going to move on and do some of the prep work for our veggies and what we call mise en place. That's putting everything in place, getting everything cut, chopped, measured, prepared, so then when it's time to cook, pretty much all we have to do is dump and stir. So the first thing I need, if you can follow along on your recipes, is I have my salmon pieces, 4 ounces of salmon, prepared. The next thing I need to do is to prepare some julienne vegetables. I have my carrots already prepared. I have some leeks, which I cooked or sliced and cleaned. And I have some zucchini that I julienned. I'm going to add some shiitake mushrooms to our pouch. And when you clean mushrooms, what you want to do is avoid putting mushrooms in water. So I'm going to take a damp paper towel and then just clean off the top of the mushroom. And for shiitake mushrooms, I need to remove the stem because the stem is inedible. The stem is fine if you want to add it to a stock, a vegetable stock or a chicken stock, but it's too tough to eat. I'm going to put my shiitake mushroom cap down on my cutting board, and I'm going to slice this into some long julienne slices. Putting the tip of my knife blade down, cutting straight through the product that I'm cutting, and then pushing forward. And that motion of pushing forward is going to separate the pieces from the main product that I'm cutting. Okay, so I have my shiitake mushrooms prepared. I'll put those aside. I'm going to cut some red pepper and some yellow pepper. When I cut peppers, what I usually try to do is avoid getting the seeds all over the cutting board. So I stand the pepper up and just cut down along the sides. I'm going to save that bottom piece as well, so that your seeds and all of your ribs are self-contained. This works very well if you're cooking with jalapenos or habaneros or hot peppers, because the seeds are very hot, and so are the veins inside of the pepper. So I'm going to, when you're cutting peppers, you need to put the skin side down because the skin is very tough. So in order to make a nice cut, it's easier to cut through the flesh first. And I'm going to use that same technique that I did before, putting the tip of my knife blade down, cutting straight through the product, and then pushing forward. I'm going to cut off a piece of yellow pepper and julienne that as well. And then because we're making salmon en papillote, we're using a fish, I'm going to also add a bit of fennel. Fennel pairs really well with fish, and it just is a beautiful aromatic flavor when you open up your en papillote pouch after it's cooked. So this is a fennel bowl. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off the stems. Then I'm going to put flat side down and cut straight through the bulb. Now, I don't know if you can see there's a little bit of a core in the bottom. I'm going to cut that out because that can be a little bit tough. No matter how long you cook it, it's going to stay tough and it's not very palatable. I'm going to cut that out. And then much like celery, you can see that the fennel has distinct veins in there. So what I want to do is cross-cut the fennel so that I avoid getting a very chewy piece of product. So instead of cutting in this direction, I'm going to cut across the grain. And to make some nice thin slices. And this has a wonderful licorice flavor that becomes even more mild when you cook it. It's absolutely delicious and pairs really, really nicely with fish. Okay, so I have all of my vegetables julienned and ready to go. The next thing I'm going to do is prepare our topping for our salmon, which is a citrus gremolata. So I'm going to slice up some herbs. I'm going to slice up some beautiful chives. Straight down and push forward, just like we cut our other vegetables. And I'm going to remove this to a bowl. I'm going to add some fresh parsley. You can also snip chives with scissors if you want. If it's easier for you to cut it that way, that works really well. I'm going to add some fresh parsley. So I have some parsley here. I have some already cleaned for you, but I wanted to show you the part that I'm going to use. I'm going to avoid using the stem in this recipe. I'm just going to pull the leaves off, and I'm going to save the stems for a soup stock, a vegetable stock, or a chicken stock. You wouldn't want to put the leaves in the stock because the leaves will pull out a lot of color because of the chlorophyll in the leaves, but the stems won't give your stock a green color like the leaves will. And there's still a lot of flavor in the stems, so we don't want to waste them. Sometimes what I do is all of these little extra ingredients, the stems of the parsley, the onion shavings, the outside of the onion peels, the ends of the carrots, I put in a Ziploc bag and collect all of that, put it in the freezer, and just keep collecting it. And then when I make a stock, I just pull that out and use that. So you cut parsley a little bit different than we cut the chives. I'm going to make a big pile in the center. And instead of doing that motion that I showed you before, we're going to put the tip of the knife blade down. And think of the tip of the knife blade as a pivot point. And I'm going to move my elbow away from my body and then pull it back in. Push that back together into a pile. Just go back and forth. You want to make sure that you keep your fingers out of the way. So you can see I have my thumb tucked underneath my hand. Okay, so our parsley is already chopped. And I'm going to remove that to the bowl where the chives are. I need a zest of a lemon. So you want to make sure when you're zesting a lemon that the first thing you do is wash it. So you wash it very well. And then I also need the juice of a lemon, but you need to zest it before you juice it. So I'm going to zest right into my bowl. And this is a microplane. Just going to go back and forth. And I'm only going to pull off the yellow part of the lemon. I don't want to go far enough so I start getting into the pith, which is the white part underneath the skin. The pith is very bitter, and I don't want those bitter essence in my food. The skin of the lemon actually has more flavor than the juice. A lot of the essential oils are in the skin, so sometimes when you're zesting, you'll see a little bit of oil squirt out. You know, I'm sure some of you may use lemon oil for polishing your furniture, and they get that from the lemon skins. Okay, now that our lemon is zested, I'm going to cut it in half. And I'm going to add the juice to the fresh herbs and the lemon zest. Okay. So, you can take this as well. Excellent. So the next thing I want to add is just a little bit of olive oil. And then I'm going to mix that until it's well combined. Okay? You could also, instead of the gremolata that we're making today, you could also use a little bit of prepared pesto sauce. That would also be very nice on top. The other thing that I normally would add to that is a little bit of white wine, but I don't have white wine today, so that's an optional ingredient. Just adds a little bit more extra flavor. So now I'm ready. Oh, one thing I need to do. I'm going to add a few pea pods. So I need to stem the pea pods, just make sure that the strings are off. Because they can be tough. Okay, these are pretty good. I think I'm just going to use 4 today. Okay, so now we're ready to, all of our mise en place, all of our prep work is in place. And I need to add a little bit of minced garlic to our gremolata. Here it is. So I'm going to first crush it with the back of my knife, make some slices. And then the same technique that I used for the parsley, I'm going to use for our garlic. You can add a pinch of salt in here or a pinch of sugar, and that will act as an abrasive, and it will help break down the garlic into nice fine pieces if it doesn't get fine enough for you. This is coming along nicely. You can also use the side of your knife to help get your garlic nice and fine. Okay, the smaller you make the garlic, the more flavor you get out of it. So we're going to add, that's the last ingredient that I'm going to add to the gremolata. Now you guys can check your recipe and see if I forgot anything, but I think that's it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put everything together. So I'm going to start out with my heart. I'm going to place it on the table, and I'm going to take a little bit of olive oil and spread that along both sides of the heart. And what this is going to do, it's just going to prevent the vegetables and the salmon from sticking to the parchment. I'm going to leave about 3/4 of an inch border around the side. I'm going to do the other side. And that 3/4 of an inch border is what I'm going to use to make my seal. Okay. So I'm going to start out by putting 2 cups of spinach. If you don't like spinach, you can choose something else. And approximately a cup or so of our julienne vegetables. So I'm going to add some of our beautiful red peppers, some of our zucchini strips. I have the leek as an aromatic. It's going to add just a mild onion taste. Some of our fennel, shiitake mushrooms, carrots, and then our pea pods. You know, I think these pea pods are a little large. I think I'm going to cut them in half so that they're the same size as our zucchini and our peppers. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is place our salmon on top of our vegetables. And then I'm going to top the salmon with the gremolata. Okay. I'm going to add just a pinch of salt and pepper. This is a heart-healthy class, but we do need a little bit of salt and pepper. Everything is fresh. There's no salt and pepper in anything that we prepared today. The pepper isn't a problem, but we do want to watch our sodium content. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of pepper over top and just a pinch of salt. 3-finger pinch is about 1/8 of a teaspoon, so that is a measurement. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I need to take our parchment and prepare it into a nice little tight pouch. So I'm going to fold over the piece of parchment paper that does not have the ingredients on it, and I'm going to start at the top of the heart, fold it, and then make a crease with my finger. Another fold and make a crease. Fold and crease all the way around the heart. Sometimes as I get out to the edge, I'll do double folds. Okay, and after each fold, I'm making sure that I'm creasing it because I don't want to allow the steam to escape. I want to keep the steam inside of the pouch. Cooking on papillote is a very quick cooking method because all of your contents are contained and steam inside the pouch. And because you have such a small space, it cooks very, very quickly. The beautiful thing about cooking en papillote is that everything that you prepare is moist when it comes out. And it allows for some people who don't like fish, it is a very mild, it lends a very mild flavor to fish when it's cooked in this way. At the end of my heart, I have a little tail. I'm just going to twist it and then tuck that underneath. And then I'm going to put this on a sheet pan. And this is going to bake in a 450-degree oven, which has been preheated, for approximately 10 minutes. Okay, so it cooks very quickly once we make our pouch. So we're just going to put that aside, and I think we'll cook that later. So when it comes out of the oven, this has been cooked. This was cooked about 15 minutes ago. Your pouch is nice and puffed. You can see a little bit of browning in your parchment paper. And typically, the pouch is served at tableside because what you want your guests to enjoy, your family members that you're preparing this for, is just the wonderful aromatic steam that comes out of the pouch when you take it out of the oven. So you can use a knife or a pair of kitchen shears. And we're just going to go across the top of our parchment pouch. Pull the paper aside. Let me try this one. I'm going to go get underneath the vegetables. Remove them to the platter. And then our salmon goes on top. And this is our entree today, salmon en papillote. Okay. Sometimes what I like to do at the end is just garnish with a little bit of fresh herbs or serve with a lemon wedge. Makes very nice presentation. For our farro salad, we are using, the recipe calls for 1.5 cups of cooked farro. 1.5 cups of cooked farro will yield about 3 cups in total after it's prepared, so it doubles in volume. Farro is an ancient grain. It's an ancient wheat. It is sold in the supermarkets or a specialty store, and it's just wonderful. It's very easy to digest. It's high in fiber, and it makes a great substitute for rice, couscous. You can use it in hot applications or a cold application. So we already have our cooked farro in the bowl. The way that you cook the farro, you can use your package directions as a guide. You can cook it in water or you can cook it in stock. If I'm cooking it in water, I usually add a bay leaf to it or some aromatic vegetables like carrots or celery, just to lend some flavor to the water. You can also soak the farro overnight. It takes about 30 minutes generally to cook farro if you soak it overnight and then rinse it and cook it in clean water. It only takes about 10 or 15 minutes to cook. If you don't soak it, it takes about approximately 30 minutes to cook. They do sell something called pearled Farro, which has some of the bran removed, so that cooks a little bit quicker. So make sure that you use your package as a guide when you're cooking the Farro, just so you can get the correct cooking time. It's similar in the way that it looks similar to risotto, but the beautiful thing about Farro is that it maintains the individual grains. Unlike risotto, when you prepare a risotto, the risotto breaks down and becomes very glutinous and blends together. Farro is not gluten-free because it is a wheat derivative. Okay, so what we're going to do is prepare our roasted vegetables. We've already done that, but I wanted to show you how you would do that. We're using, in this recipe, 3 roasted vegetables. We're using roasted corn, roasted mushrooms, and roasted tomatoes. So what we need to do is take our tomatoes, a little bit of olive oil, just a pinch of salt and pepper, pinch of salt, 3-finger pinch, 1/8 of a teaspoon, and pepper. And we're going to toss that. And then place that in a single layer on your sheet pan. I usually always do the vegetables separately when I'm roasting them because they have different cooking times. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing with the mushrooms. Be careful with the mushrooms because they like to soak up the oil. So you just want to use a little bit. Once again, just a pinch of salt and pepper. You could use herbs if you wanted. If you'd like dried, you could use dried oregano, dried basil as well, if you wanted to enhance the flavor. And then we're going to put our mushrooms in a single layer on the sheet pan. And the last thing we're going to do is the corn. Same thing. A little bit of pepper and a pinch of salt. I'm going to toss. And same thing in a single layer on a sheet pan. Now, ordinarily, these would go on 3 separate sheet pans, but for today's demonstration, I think you get the idea. Right? Okay, so this roast in a... Yes?
If you use a frozen corn, do you let it defrost?
I take the frozen corn out of the freezer, and usually by the time you toss it, put it on the sheet pan, it is defrosted. It defrosts very quickly. Okay, so we're putting our roasted vegetables in a 450-degree oven, and they each have separate, different cooking times. The corn will cook pretty quickly. We just wanted to get it nice and brown. We put the olive oil to enhance in the browning, and the pinch of salt helps draw some of the moisture out, so we're able to get a nice roasted vegetable. And it also helps to allow the sweet flavors to come through. Okay, so this is what our corn looks like after it's roasted, our tomatoes, and our mushrooms. Okay. The other thing we need to do is toast our almonds. You can do the almonds on a sheet pan in a single layer. You don't need to add anything to it. There's plenty of oil in the almonds so that you can just put them flat down on the sheet pan, pop them in the oven, and they'll toast in maybe 5 to 7 minutes. If you have a small quantity like I have today, you can also toast them right on the stovetop in a saute pan. Okay, so when you're looking down your recipe, the first 4 or 5 instructions are how to roast your vegetables. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to place our farro in a bowl, which we've done that. We're going to add some spinach to that. You can also add arugula. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the farro to the spinach. I think that'll be a little bit easier. There we go. We're going to add some chopped herbs. Our corn, mushrooms, almonds, and we're going to toss the ingredients until they're well combined. The only ingredient that I did not toss initially is the tomatoes because they have a tendency to break apart a bit, so I usually add the tomatoes after I add the salad dressing. So I'm going to put this aside along with my tomatoes. And we're going to make our salad dressing. So we're going to be making a basic vinaigrette. And once you learn how to make a salad dressing, you never have to buy a bottle of salad dressing again. It's very simple. We're making an emulsified dressing, and we have 2 agents that are going to help the dressing come together or emulsify. We're using some Dijon mustard and honey. So we're going to add our Dijon mustard to the bottom of the bowl. Our honey. I'm going to add a garlic clove, minced. Oh, I already have one done. That's even better. Add that. Going to mix those until they're combined. Next, I'm going to add my champagne vinegar. Okay, and now we're going to whisk in our oil. You do not want to add your oil in this step because you need to add your oil in a slow, steady stream in order to get an emulsified dressing. So I'm going to whisk quickly, and Jess is going to pour slowly. I'm going to add a pinch of salt and some pepper. And you can see we have a beautiful emulsified dressing. Or if we did not add the oil in that slow, steady stream, the oil and vinegar would separate. It's important to when you're doing that technique to make sure that you add the oil slowly. Now the emulsified the vinaigrette is a temporary emulsion, so it will stay together for a few minutes. As soon as you stop whisking, it starts to separate, but once you whisk again, it'll come right back together. You can also make vinaigrettes in a food processor or in your blender. You would put all of the ingredients instead of the oil in the basket of the food processor or in your blender container, and then you would turn it on, and then you would slowly drizzle the oil through. Okay, so we're going to add our vinaigrette to our salad. I'm going to toss that well. Once our vinaigrette is well combined, I'm going to add my tomatoes and a little bit more fresh herbs. Yeah, I think that will be nice. In the summer, when you have an abundance of fresh herbs, if any of you have gardens, it's actually nice to put the whole leaves in here as well. So, and that's our Farro salad. Thank you very much for coming today.